Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving deep into something that's been making waves all over the world, China's military ambitions. We hear so much about their economic power, right? But what about their military strength? In particular, their big goal to become a, quote, world-class military
Mhm.
by 2049, which just so happens to be the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. And one thing that's really been grabbing people's attention is this massive new military command center they're building. I mean, it's seriously huge, like 10 times bigger than the Pentagon.
Yeah, it's not just the size that's got people talking, it's what it means for their overall strategy. Building something this big is a pretty clear sign of China's ambitions, They're not just happy with being a regional power anymore, they want to be able to project their military power globally.
So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What exactly do we know about this place, this Beijing military city, as some have called it?
Well, from what we've been able to gather, it's a sprawling complex, about 1,500 acres. It's located about 30 kilometers southwest of Beijing. And here's where it gets really interesting. It's rumored to have a whole network of deep underground bunkers, most likely designed to withstand even the most extreme attacks, like even nuclear strikes.
Wow, that definitely raises some questions. Is this purely defensive, or could it also be used for offensive operations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it really gets to the heart of the debate about China's true intentions. Some analysts think it's mainly a sign of insecurity, a defensive measure against threats they perceive. But others see it as a forward operating base, something that would allow them to project their military power much further.
Either way, it's definitely a sign that they're taking their military capabilities very seriously.
Yeah.
And this construction project is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing a rapid modernization across all branches of China's military. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, even their space program. Take their nuclear arsenal, for instance. It's predicted to hit 1,500 warheads by 2035. That's 3 times larger than what it is now. And that has some serious implications for global stability.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about China's growing naval power. What's driving that? And what are the potential consequences?
Well, there are a few factors at play here. They've got a long coastline to defend, for one, and they have substantial maritime interests. Plus, their geopolitical goals are getting more and more ambitious. To reach those goals, they need a navy that can operate far from home. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The PLA Navy has already got more warships than the U.S. Navy, just in terms of numbers, and they're also developing a more advanced fleet. Things like aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, and even nuclear-powered submarines.
So it's not just about having more ships, it's about having more advanced and capable ships.
Exactly. And the shift in naval power could totally reshape things in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. It raises concerns about their ability to control those vital shipping lanes and to project their power into new areas and maybe even challenge U.S. naval dominance.
It seems pretty clear that China's making a real effort to catch up to the U.S. militarily, and in some areas maybe even surpass them. But is it just about matching U.S. capabilities? Or are they aiming for something even bigger?
That's a question that keeps a lot of military analysts up at night. On the one hand, they've historically been focused on defending their territory and regional security. But their economy's booming and their global ambitions are growing. It makes you wonder if they might be aiming for a more forceful role on the world stage. And their military modernization seems to suggest that.
Yeah, it's a complex and ever-changing situation. And one date that keeps coming up when we talk about China's military ambitions is 2027. What makes that year so significant?
Well, it marks the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army. It's a symbolic milestone, and a lot of experts believe China wants to show off its military might by then. There's also a growing concern, particularly in the U.S., that China might be ready to launch a military operation against Taiwan by 2027.
So that date is kind of like a potential deadline, pushing them to speed up their military modernization.
Exactly. It injects a sense of urgency into the whole situation.
We've talked a lot about China's strengths, their rapid modernization and growing capabilities. But no military is perfect, right? What are some of the weaknesses China faces in its pursuit of military dominance?
One area where they've lagged behind is in integrating and coordinating their different branches. They haven't been as good as the U.S., for example, at carrying out joint operations, the kind that seamlessly combine air, land, and sea power. This lack of network centricity, as it's called, has been a known weakness.
And how does this new mega command center fit into all of this? Could it actually be part of the solution?
It's definitely possible. The Beijing military city is likely being designed to create a more integrated and efficient command and control structure. Imagine a central hub where information flows smoothly between different branches, allowing them to make faster decisions and coordinate operations more effectively.
So it's not just about the physical building itself, it's about creating a more cohesive and effective fighting force.
Exactly. It's about overcoming those internal challenges and developing a military that can operate as one unified whole,
Yeah.
rather than a bunch of separate parts.
That makes sense. But of course, we can't talk about China's military ambitions without considering the U.S. perspective. How does the U.S. view all of this, and what are they doing in response?
The U.S. is watching China's military rise with a mix of concern and determination. They see it as a direct challenge to their own military dominance and to the existing world order. The 2024 U.S. Department of Defense report on China's military power lays out these concerns pretty clearly, especially focusing on China's investments in its nuclear arsenal, naval capabilities, technological advancements, and how they manage their personnel.
So the U.S. is taking this very seriously.
Absolutely. They're responding by investing in new technologies themselves, strengthening alliances in the Indo-Pacific region, and modernizing their own military capabilities. It's a classic case of great power competition, with both sides jockeying for strategic advantage. And it goes beyond just military hardware. This rivalry spills over into the economic and technological arenas, too. It's about who controls those key technologies, who dominates global supply chains, and who gets to set the rules for this emerging digital world.
It's like a high-stakes game of chess with multiple dimensions. And for countries in the Asia-Pacific region, this rivalry creates a real dilemma. They're stuck between these two giants, trying to balance their economic interests with their security concerns.
Exactly. Look at Japan, for instance. They have a strong alliance with the U.S., but they also have deep economic ties with China. It's a delicate balancing act, and it highlights how this rivalry is having ripple effects across the globe.
We've been talking in broad strokes, but let's zoom in on some specifics. One area that's particularly worrisome is China's development of hypersonic weapons. Those are real game changers, aren't they?
They sure are. Hypersonic weapons travel at more than 5 times the speed of sound, that's Mach 5, which makes them incredibly difficult to detect and intercept with our traditional missile defense systems. Imagine a missile that can hit a target thousands of miles away in just minutes, with little or no warning.
That's a pretty scary thought. And it's not just the speed, is it? It's also about their ability to maneuver.
You got it. Unlike those traditional ballistic missiles, which follow a predictable path, hypersonic weapons can change direction and flight, making them even harder to track and stop. This creates a whole new set of challenges for those trying to plan our defenses.
So what does all this mean for the U.S. and its allies? How are they adapting to this new threat?
It's a top priority for military planners. They're putting a lot of resources into new technologies, things like advanced radar systems, laser weapons, even space-based sensors, all to try and counter this hypersonic threat. It's a technological arms race with incredibly high stakes.
Sounds like we're having to rethink how we defend ourselves.
Absolutely. Hypersonic weapons are forcing military planners to question their assumptions about how wars are fought and to come up with completely new strategies and tactics.
And it's not just hypersonics, right? China is also making major progress in artificial intelligence, or AI, and how it can be used in the military. How's that changing things on the battlefield?
AI is transforming warfare in some pretty fundamental ways. We're seeing the development of autonomous weapons systems, AI-powered decision-making tools, and advanced cyber warfare capabilities. Picture drones that can operate on their own, swarms of robots coordinating attacks, and algorithms that can predict what the enemy's going to do next.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But it's actually happening.
It is, and it raises a lot of ethical and strategic questions. How do we make sure humans stay in control of those autonomous weapons? How do we prevent things from escalating unintentionally? These are questions we're just starting to wrap our heads around.
And it's not just about the tech itself, is it? It's about the people who use it. China's putting a lot of effort into training a new generation of tech-savvy soldiers, sailors, and airmen, ones who can operate in this increasingly complex and technologically driven battle space.
That's right. They realize that having the best tech is only part of the equation. You also need skilled and well-trained people who can actually use it effectively. They're focusing on attracting top talent, especially in those STEM fields. And they've got rigorous training programs to make sure their military personnel can handle these advanced systems with expertise.
So it's a holistic approach, focusing on both the technological and human aspects of warfare.
Precisely. They understand that future wars won't just be fought with weapons, but with data, algorithms, and highly skilled people.
And they're not afraid to show off these capabilities, are they?
Nope, not at all. We've seen a clear increase in China's military exercises and shows of force in recent years, especially in the South China Sea. These exercises serve a few purposes. They're testing out new weapon systems, training their personnel, and sending a message to the region and the world about their growing military power.
It's a way of projecting their power,
Hmm.
showing off their capabilities and their resolve, and it just adds another layer of complexity to this rivalry.
Yeah, and it creates a lot of uncertainty for other countries in the region. They're having to navigate this increasingly tense environment and make tough choices about how to respond to China's growing assertiveness.
Okay, so we've covered China's ambitions, their rapid modernization, and the specific advancements they're making. Now let's step back a bit and think about the bigger picture. What does this military buildup mean for the global balance of power? What kind of world order are we heading towards?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? We're moving away from that unipolar world that emerged after the Cold War, where the U.S. was the sole superpower. We're shifting towards a more multipolar world, where power is spread out more, and China is playing a bigger and bigger role.
And that brings both opportunities and challenges.
Exactly. This multipolar world could lead to more cooperation and stability, with different countries balancing each other out, but it could also lead to more competition, instability, and even conflict.
So it's not necessarily a winner-take-all situation.
Right. It's more complicated than that. There's potential for both cooperation and competition.
And this all connects back to China's goal of achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That goal is at the heart of their worldview and their long-term strategy. They see it as restoring China's rightful place in the world, like going back to a time when China was a dominant force.
And their military ambitions are a crucial part of achieving that goal.
Exactly. They believe a strong military is essential for protecting their interests, projecting their influence, and ultimately achieving their vision of national rejuvenation.
So for those of us following this issue, what should we be paying attention to in the coming years? What are the potential flashpoints?
There are quite a few. The situation in the South China Sea is still a major concern. Taiwan is another potential flashpoint. And that broader competition for technological dominance, especially in areas like AI and hypersonic weapons, that's going to keep heating up.
It's a complex and rapidly changing landscape with extremely high stakes. It really feels like we're at a turning point in history. The choices made by the US, China, and other global players the next few years will have a huge impact on the future of international relations and global security. But let's bring this back down to earth for a second. How do these geopolitical shifts actually affect everyday people? How does this rivalry show up in our lives?
It might seem like something for diplomats and military strategists to worry about, but the truth is, it affects all of us in very real ways. For one thing, this competition has a direct impact on the global economy. Think about trade, supply chains, access to resources. Those are all influenced by the balance of power between nations.
We're already seeing this play out with things like the semiconductor industry, right? Where the US and China are both trying to control this crucial technology.
Exactly. And that competition has consequences for everything, from the prices of consumer electronics to the development of those cutting-edge technologies like AI and quantum computing. The average person might not be thinking about geopolitics when they buy a new phone, but those decisions are being made within a context shaped by these bigger forces.
And it's not just economics. This rivalry also has implications for our personal freedoms and our privacy. Think about the increasing use of surveillance technologies, the control of information, and the possibility of cyber warfare.
Right. We're living in a world where everything's connected, and those digital technologies are becoming more and more a part of our lives. As this rivalry between the U.S. and China heats up, we can expect both sides to use these technologies to their advantage. And that could have serious consequences for our individual liberties.
So this isn't some far-off threat. It's something that could directly affect our daily lives in the very near future. And as informed citizens, it's crucial to understand these dynamics and have informed discussions about them. But with so much information out there, it can be tight to sort through it all, to figure out what's true and what's not, to tell the difference between credible sources and propaganda.
That's where critical thinking comes in. We have to be skeptical about the information we're getting, question our assumptions, look for different perspectives, and double-check our sources. It's about having a healthy sense of skepticism without becoming cynical or apathetic.
It's about being engaged and informed citizens, aware of the challenges and opportunities that this new era brings. And that brings us back to the year 2049. China's vision of achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by then might seem far off, But in geopolitics, it's right around the corner.
And the choices made in the next few years will determine whether this rejuvenation happens in a world of cooperation or confrontation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key message you want our listeners to take away?
I think the most important thing is to realize that we're living in a time of massive change. The global balance of power is shifting, the nature of warfare is evolving, and technology is reshaping our world faster than ever before. These changes present both challenges and opportunities, and it's up to all of us to engage with these issues in a thoughtful and responsible way.
It's a call to action for all of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and help shape the future we want to see. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into China's military ambitions. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
It's been great discussing this with you.
And for all of you listening out there, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more insightful content. And don't forget to share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay curious.
And it's not just military hardware either. It goes beyond that, This rivalry spills over into economics and technology, too.
It really does. It's about who controls these crucial technologies, who dominates the global supply chains, and who gets to set the rules for this whole new digital world we're living in.
Exactly. It's a multidimensional chess game with incredibly high stakes.
And for countries in the Asia-Pacific, this rivalry puts them in a really tough spot. They're caught between these two superpowers.
Yeah, they are.
Trying to juggle their economic ties with one and their security concerns with the other.
Exactly. Take Japan, for example. They have this strong alliance with the U.S., but they also have deep economic ties with China. It's a real tightrope walk for them. And it shows how this rivalry is having ripple effects all over the world.
It really does. We've been talking about this in broad strokes, but let's zero in on some specifics. One area that's particularly concerning is China's development of these hypersonic weapons. Those are game changers, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely they are. Hypersonic weapons travel at incredible speeds, like more than 5 times the speed of sound. That's Mach 5. And that makes them incredibly difficult to detect and intercept, especially using our current missile defense systems. Imagine a missile that can strike a target thousands of miles away in a matter of minutes, with almost no warning.
That's a pretty chilling thought. And it's not just the speed either, is it? It's the maneuverability.
Right, you are. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles, which follow a predictable trajectory, these hypersonic weapons can actually maneuver in flight, making them even more difficult to track and intercept. This creates a whole new set of challenges for defense planners.
It does. So what does this mean for the U.S. and its allies? How are they adapting to this new threat?
Well, it's the top priority for military planners right now. They're investing heavily in new technologies. Things like advanced radar systems, laser weapons, even space-based sensors, all aimed at countering this hypersonic threat. It's a full-blown technological arms race. And the stakes couldn't be higher.
It sounds like we're having to completely rethink how we defend ourselves.
Absolutely. Hypersonic weapons are forcing military planners to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about warfare. They're having to come up with entirely new strategies and tactics.
And it's not just hypersonics, right? China's also making huge strides in artificial intelligence, AI as it's known, and its military applications. How's that changing the landscape of warfare?
AI is transforming warfare in some pretty profound ways. We're seeing the development of autonomous weapons systems. Think about drones that can operate independently, swarms of robotic systems that can coordinate attacks. We're also seeing AI-powered decision-making tools and algorithms that can analyze vast amounts of data to predict enemy movements. This is changing the game in a big way.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But it's becoming our reality.
It is, and it raises a lot of ethical and strategic questions, like how do we ensure that humans remain in control of these autonomous weapon systems? How do we prevent unintended escalation? These are things we're just beginning to grapple with.
And it's not just about the technology itself, is it?
Yeah.
It's about the people who operate it.
That's right.
China is investing heavily in training a new generation of tech-savvy soldiers, sailors, and airmen who can operate in this increasingly complex and technologically driven battle space.
Absolutely. They recognize that having the best technology is only part of the equation. You need skilled and well-trained personnel who can use it effectively. So they're focusing on recruiting top talent, especially in those STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. And they're implementing rigorous training programs to make sure their military personnel are proficient in operating these advanced systems.
So it's a comprehensive approach, focusing on both the technological and the human elements of warfare.
Precisely. They understand that the future of warfare will be fought not just with weapons, but with data, algorithms, and highly skilled individuals.
And it seems like they're not shying away from putting these capabilities on display.
No, they're not.
We've seen a noticeable increase in China's military exercises and displays of force in recent years, particularly in the South China Sea.
That's right.
It's a way of projecting their power, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. It serves multiple purposes. They get to test out their new weapon systems, they get to train their personnel, and they send a clear message to the region and the world about their growing military might.
It's a form of power projection, demonstrating their capabilities and their resolve. And it adds another layer of complexity to this rivalry.
It does, and it creates a lot of uncertainty for other countries in the region. They have to navigate this increasingly tense environment and make difficult choices about how to respond to China's growing assertiveness.
Okay, so we've talked about China's ambitions, their modernization, all these specific advancements they're making. But now let's zoom out a little. What does this mean for the global balance of power? What kind of world are we moving towards?
That's the big question, isn't it? We're seeing a shift away from that unipolar world we had after the Cold War, where the U.S. was the dominant superpower. Things are moving towards a more multipolar world, where power is more spread out. And China is definitely becoming a major player.
And that creates both opportunities and challenges, right?
Exactly. A multipolar world could potentially lead to more cooperation and stability, with different countries balancing each other out. But it could also lead to increased competition, instability, and even conflict.
So it's not necessarily a zero-sum game.
Right. It's a more complex dynamic with the potential for both cooperation and competition.
And this all ties back to China's goal of achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That goal is at the core of their worldview and their long-term strategy. They see it as restoring China to its rightful place on the world stage, a return to a time when China was a dominant power.
And their military ambitions are a big part of achieving that goal.
Exactly. They believe that a strong military is essential for protecting their interests, projecting their influence, and ultimately achieving their vision of national rejuvenation.
It really does feel like we're at a pivotal moment in history. The decisions made by the U.S., China, and other key players in the next few years will shape the future of international relations and global security. But let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. How do these geopolitical shifts affect everyday people? How does this rivalry play out in our lives?
It might seem like something for diplomats and generals to worry about, but honestly, it affects all of us in very real ways. For starters, this competition directly impacts the global economy. Trade, supply chains, access to resources, these are all influenced by the balance of power between nations.
Like we're seeing with the semiconductor industry, for instance, where the U.S. and China are vying for control of this critical technology.
Exactly, and that competition affects everything, from the price of your smartphone to the development of cutting-edge technologies like AI and quantum computing. Most people probably aren't thinking about geopolitics when they buy a new gadget, but those choices are happening within a context shaped by these larger forces.
And it's not just about the economy either. This rivalry also affects our personal freedoms and privacy. Think about the growing use of surveillance technologies, the control of information, the potential for cyber warfare.
Absolutely. We live in an interconnected world where digital technologies are increasingly integrated into our lives. And as this rivalry between the U.S. and China intensifies, we can expect both sides to use these technologies to advance their interests, which could have major implications for our individual liberties.
So this isn't some distant threat. It's something that could directly impact our daily lives in the very near future. As informed citizens, it's more important than ever to understand what's happening and to engage in meaningful discussions about these issues. But with so much information out there, it can be hard to sift through it all, to separate fact from fiction, to know which sources to trust and which ones are pushing propaganda.
You're right, it can be overwhelming, and that's where critical thinking becomes crucial. We need to be discerning consumers of information, question our assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives, and cross-reference our sources. It's about developing a healthy skepticism without falling into cynicism or apathy.
It's about being engaged and informed citizens, aware of the challenges and opportunities that this new era presents. And that brings us back to 2049. China's goal of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by then might seem far off. But in geopolitical terms, it's just around the corner.
It is, and the decisions made in the coming years will determine what kind of world we'll be living in. Will this rejuvenation happen in a world characterized by cooperation or confrontation?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. As we wrap up this deep dive, What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to recognize that we're living in a period of profound transformation. The global balance of power is shifting. The nature of warfare is changing. Technology is reshaping our world at an unprecedented pace. These changes bring both challenges and opportunities, and it's up to all of us to engage with them thoughtfully and responsibly.
It's call to action for all of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and to participate in shaping the future we want to see. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into China's military ambitions. We hope you found it insightful.
It's been a pleasure.
And for all of you listening out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more. And don't forget to share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay curious.